Hope you guys are doing good. Welcome back into Content Meta. If you are new to the channel and subscribe to our content, please make it official. Harass that sub button, leave a like, and drop kick that notification bell. If you haven't seen this week's episode, wait, hold on. What are you doing? There will be major spoilers from here on out. Well, we were kind of curious to see or find out whether or not the show would continue on with this serial style theme corresponding with each time period. And in this week's episode, we fall headlong down into the rabbit hole of 70s tropes and Easter eggs galore. So let's get into it. And why do I feel like I was born to do this review? Yeah, baby. Anyway, okay, so from the looks of it, May seems to be adjusting to being a feelings magnet, or at the very least, trying to take the training wheels off. One of their very first objectives takes them back to that old speakeasy, the S.H.I.E.L.D. safe house, where May gets to exercise her newfound ability. She later uses this ability to find out the inner state of a certain individual just to see where he stands, which at the moment was in a good place. In fact, after just a small amount of time spent in the safe house, they learned that Enoch is no longer a bartender and that he left over a year ago. Even though things seem relatively the same, something has obviously changed to make Enoch feel the need to leave. Now, while there's a lot more left to discuss regarding the safe house, we've got to address what's going on with Gemma and the implications of it. It would appear that at some point in her interactions with the Chromicons, they've implanted her with some sort of device. Now, what this device is, or even what it does, we don't quite know yet, but it is quite possible that Enoch does. Here's where it gets downright messy. Keep in mind that the Chromicons were prepared to do whatever it took to save their society after their world was destroyed by the strike. Mix that in with up to this point, every time they've jumped, they've been in tow and never in the lead. Whenever asked about how the jump works, Simmons either says,
"I don't have that information yet. I'll scan the terrain."
Or,
"It's complicated. Even I barely understand it. I'm sorry. We are working on it, but it's complicated."
Complicated? Then explain it to me. I'm a big boy.
It's almost as if she has the same cryptic response that Phil had every time someone mentions Tahiti.
It's a magical place.
Yeah, Agent Ward told me they sent you to Tahiti.
It's a magical place.
You mentioned that.
Not everyone gets sent to Tahiti.
It's a magical place.
It's just an observation. One thing's for certain though, the further we go along in these episodes, it appears that they're in over their heads. So while the rest of the team is at the safe house, Yo-Yo and Mack does some recon at the lighthouse to try to get a sense of S.H.I.E.L.D. status in their current day. Here, they get a little bit more much needed alone time, just before discovering that the base is not quite abandoned after all, but has been in fact been repurposed for something entirely different from what they were used to remembering. Case in point, the team then learns that General Rick Stoner, who was just a new recruit in Sousa's time, has been tasked to launch the infamous Project Insight from the Winter Soldier timeline, only now in the 1970s, some 40-something years ahead of schedule. Now, there's a lot to go over, and I hope most of you know that Insight was just a project which Hydra cooked up in order to lawfully eliminate S.H.I.E.L.D. assets, namely the Avengers from our present. Yeah, see, those MCU tie-ins are really starting to roll in. Yet still, the most obvious thing is that the proposition which the Chromicon had offered on the train to Coulson has held true to his end of the bargain, that things will become difficult from their involvement alone. And to further complicate matters, Wilford Malik has surpassed his original date of expiration, replacing Alexander Pierce as the prominent S.H.I.E.L.D. Hydra head. Now, one other issue worth mentioning is that when we first saw Gideon Malik and his brother Nathaniel in S.H.I.E.L.D. canon, their father, Wilford Malik, had just passed away. Gideon, though, in the previous timeline, expressly forbade his brother to deal with Dr. Whitehall's quote-unquote version of Hydra. Here, though, we clearly see an older, more ambitious version of Nathaniel, craving the powers which he saw Daisy or Quake utilize, thus leaving his request for Whitehall, who in this time still seems to be incarcerated. Okay, so there were some Easter egg references in this episode we felt the need to dedicate a nice segment to. So, grab your nerd caps and let's get into it. Now, the first one is a small callback in the music reference used in the New Deal of the first episode of this season. Now, when Daisy first infiltrates the room that she's familiar with in the speakeasy, she comes across a computer with all the names from Insight. Now, we're only dealing with the names that are worth mentioning, starting with Bruce Banner. Why might do my, of course, an obvious one. Victoria Hand, who was, of course, in our Tahiti clip, who was actually a high-ranking level 8 S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and in the comics first appeared in Invincible Iron Man number 8. Betty Wright, the singer, I don't know, just a 70s reference who just passed away last month. Nice shout out and RIP. Michael Phillips, who was an old Punisher reference, if I'm not mistaken. Jim Rita from Age of the Carter, or the Howling Commandos, better known in Captain America, the first Avengers film. Roberto Gonzalez, who first appeared in the second season of S.H.I.E.L.D., episode 14. In the S.H.I.E.L.D. safe house, May uses the name Chastity McBride, who is her comic book equal in a sense, and first appeared in Elektra in December of 1986. Enoch comes in, and with the most infamous reference, of course referring to Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And Mack makes a reference to the S.H.I.E.L.D. uniforms being too tight because, you know, they were all tight back then in the comics in the 60s. So, now, if there's any that you think I missed or glossed over, please let me know in the comment section. Well, the more this season plot unravels, the more it seems to get even more tangled. This is further demonstrated as Deke pays an old acquaintance a visit and finally delivers on a daisy-belayed order by willfully and shockingly pulling the trigger on Wilford Malik. In a mind-bending twist, however, it was seen that the Chromicons more than likely predicted this event, as seen by the photos passed to Wilford Malik by the police sergeant Chromicon just before the dirty deed. But most importantly, left for the two accomplices to realize their folly. Several things to mention here. This will more than likely be Deke and Yo-Yo's undoing. Mack, of course, told Deke 40 years ago not to go through with it at all, and his mission was to bring him in. Now, even more intriguing is the fact that Wilford was willing to go through with it in the first place, knowing full well the outcome of it. Perhaps it was his way of making up for what happened at the speakeasy when his son was in danger. Either way, they were a long way from the shore with no life preserver, seeing as how they just murdered a top-level S.H.I.E.L.D. leader. Now, their three-tiered plan to stop the launch of Insight seemed simple. Send Phil and May into the lodge hangar and place charges to blow that would flood the hangar, causing an evacuation. That's the first tier. 2, send Daisy and the self-volunteered Sousa to hack into the security cameras to oversee the whole process and make sure they had eyes on prisoners that were needed to be freed. In the third tier, capture Wilford Malik to see if they could extract any valuable information bestowed upon him by the Chromicons. But what they accomplished was hardly any of these. Now, May and Phil did manage to improvise on their plan, finding out in the process that General Rick Stoner had indeed been compromised by Hydra. And Daisy managed to send a security feed that only showed that Mack's parents were being held captive in the base. Mack chooses to opt out just to allow the launch to happen. But while a Zephyr blew the satellite out of the sky, as a result, they were exposed, thus alerting their presence to the world. So my final thoughts. For a villain who I initially thought was not living up to the whole 1,000-year lifespan and overseeing world's hype, they've put our team in a bind and have made matters far more complicated than ever before. Now, Deke will be charged for his crimes, but what's just as compelling is when Deke is talking to Gemma about how they can't find Fitz or his grandfather, and how if they can't find him, there'll be no Deke. And also, Sousa wanting to be out of the mission from feeling so out of time. Well, that just about does it. Can't wait to see how this all plays out. And for key analysis on plot points, check back in with Content Meta for next week's episode. And until then, see you then.